Om yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarottam pravaram muninam Patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi. I prostrate with folded hands before Patanjali, who benefited mankind by delivering yoga for mind, grammar for speech, and by removing impurities of body through medicine. So, in the last class, we were studying the Panchaklesha, the five afflictions in details. After stating what the five kleshas are, the Pancha kleshas, the five afflictions are avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, which means ignorance, egoism, attachment, hatred, and fear of death or clinging to life. These are the five afflictions. After just stating that, the Yoga Sutra has taken one by one all the various afflictions, defining them and elaborating them to give us a clear picture of what all these afflictions are. So, in the last class, the first two afflictions, avidya and asmita, we studied in details. Avidya, the ignorance, and asmita is
Namaskar.
egoism. Namaskar. So, these are the two uh, afflictions which we were studying in the last class in details. So, what's avidya? As we have seen that anitya, ashuchi, dukkha, anatmasu, nitya, shuchi, sukha, atma, khyati, avidya. So the things which are temporal, thus which are temporary, we see them, we conceive them, we treat them as if they are permanent. Ashuchi, the impure, which indicates the body, which is basically impure, but we treat it in a way as if it is something which is agreeable to us. Dukkha, as we were studying in the last class, all the so-called apparent pleasures of life, which ultimately, in a way or other, ends up in misery. We are so short-sighted that we don't see the intense misery which entails from all our worldly pursuits towards the sunset pleasures of life. And we take them to be as sukha, as if they are going to give us eternal pleasure. And anatmasu, this body, and everything which extends out of this body, my belongings, which are not myself. I consider them to be as if myself. In Vedanta, almost synonymous to this avidya is Maya. You all are very familiar with the term Maya. Though in yoga the word Maya is not used, in Vedanta we use it, but almost it has some same etymological meaning. What the word Maya means? In the word Maya, Ya means as we see, as is apparent, and Ma is in the sense of negation of that. Means what you see and what you think to be real is actually an apparent reality. It is not as you see. That's the word meaning of the word Maya. And almost we find is a similar meaning has been indicated to the term avidya. that all the things which are temporal, which are impure, which are full of misery, which is not ourself, we consider them to be something permanent, something pure, agreeable, something which is going to give me ultimate pleasure, and which is as if my own self. So we were studying in details in the last class. So that's the first affliction, from which, from that ignorance, what comes, the next comes is asmita. That, what is that asmita? That once that ignorance sets in, from that asmita, the sense of our identity with our psychophysical existence, that I am actually the pure conscious principle. In no way I am identified with the body mind complex. The Prakriti appears to be conscious only because of its affiliation, only because of its association with the Purusha. And once it gets associated with the Purusha, it appears to be enlivened. And immediately the Purusha, seeing that enlivened Prakriti, thinks it to be the Prakriti. So it's seeing its own reflection in the Prakriti, showing its own reflection in the psychophysical existence. It thinks itself to be the psychophysical existence. And this, my sense of amness restricted within my psychophysical existence, is the asmita. And once that is there, after that, the three evolutes follows. What are they? Raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. Attachment, hatred, and fear of death. As we told, the ones we are attached to the psychophysical existence, anything which is favorable for its existence, anything which is pleasurable for its existence, we think it is pleasurable for me. Actually, I'm not dependent on anything. I am the ever pure, perfect conscious principle. But because of that association, now I think that these are the things which is going to sustain me, and I get attached to them. These are the things which is going to give me pleasure, and I get attached to them. And just the opposite, the things which I feel is going to disintegrate my psychophysical existence. The things which are going to be painful for the psychophysical existence, I develop an aversion for them, as I think they are going to affect me. But it is in no way going to affect me. But because of that ignorance, because of that asmita, I feel it is going to affect me. And from that comes the aversion. And the clinging to life, abhisneha. That's the ultimate. That's, we all somehow have the experience, not in this life, in the past many lives, of death. Our clinging to the psychophysical existence is so strong. The pangs of death, which we have experienced again and again in the past births, is something which has created a spontaneous fear. That however we may feel that as if that fear is not there, we find at the moment of crisis, when the life is being endangered, my entire impulses, my entire reflex system reacts in a way which shows that what I profess is not true. Those reflex shows that I have a intense fear of death, and which is almost like a reflex, which is spontaneous. My entire system reacts to that situation in such a way which speaks my clinging to life, my fear of death. And that has been spoken of as the abhisneha. So these are the three evolutes which follow asmita. That ignorance, avidya, and asmita is followed by these three. So today we will take up the remaining three bit in details to understand the nature of raga, dvesha, and abhinivesha. So, what is the seventh sutra of the second chapter that defines raga? The very short sutra, Sukhanusai raga. So, what is attachment? What is raga? Raga is that which follows the remembrance. Anushai means the remembrance of pleasure, sukha. Anything which has given me pleasure, it remains as a memory. It is not lost in my subconscious mind. It is there as the memory. And whenever again I am in that circumstance, immediately that memory is revived back in my mind, which was latent in my subconscious mind as the samskara, as the latent impression, that immediately comes up as the memory, and I am drawn towards the thing which has previously given me pleasure. Now, this raga is something which results in greed. The thing which I am attached to, that results in greed. And the greed is something which, because of which we always lose the sense of propriety. So what happens? That in greed, the sense of right and wrong generally gets corrupted. The thing which is going to harm me, out of greed, I think that is the thing which I want. How it happens? We discussed it almost at the very beginning of the Yoga Sutra when we started. But let us just try to understand that how the necessity gets converted into obsession. And once we are obsessed by it, we forget the sense of propriety and we overdo it. The thing which was necessity, we start overdoing it because of our obsession, and that results in that harm starts harming us instead of really helping us. That our mind is just like, as we told, is like, just let us take an example. Our mind is like a forest. There are two villages which is separated by a thick forest. And now there was no need to travel from one village to the other. Now, for the first time, you need to go to the other village. A person from one village needs to go to the other village. So, what he will do? As there was no need previously, there was no mode of communication, there was no road. So, this person clears off the jungle, makes a road, constructs a road, and then goes to the other village. Now, next day, when he has to return or he has to travel to the other village for some other purpose, what will be his natural tendency? Once the road is created, his natural tendency would be to traverse to the already created path. He won't be thinking of creating another path. And this is the concept of neuroplasticity. That in our mind, whenever we are taking a new adventure out of necessity, we are as if creating a path through our mind. And once the path is created, now our tendency is to traverse through that path again and again. All our so-called likings, the so-called our intense attachments, the pleasures, the things which gives us pleasure in this life, they're all actually a necessity which has got converted into obsession. That example which we gave previously, still you may remember, a small child is not drinking milk. And what the mother does, adds a little sugar. And immediately it's found that the child is just suckling the milk. What has happened? That the child is found to have some innate likeness for something sweet. It is as if innate. It is already within the child. How it has happened? The so-called psychologist will say you that in the process of evolution, we the humans were food gatherers, and later we became food producers. We learned agriculture, we became food producers. When we were food gatherers, our ancestors, our predecessors, every day getting food was a challenge. They have to go to the forest to collect roots, herbs, fruits, and come back in the evening. That's the food. That's how they used to sustain. Nothing there was to store. Every day they have to venture out and bring whatever they get from the mother nature. And now, very interesting thing, that in the process of collecting these roots, fruits, herbs, they found out that anything sweet in nature nourishes us. It never kills us. Other tests, there is a doubt. If anything is sour, it may be good for us, but it may be poison, it may be toxic. Sour, bitter, salty, all those tests, there is no assurance that it is going to nourish us. It may be toxic. But they found out that if anything is sweet, invariably it is going to nourish us. There is no chance of getting poisoned by it. So now, out of necessity, they were in search of sweet roots, sweet herbs, sweet fruits. And this pursuit for food, sweet food items, as if created a path in my mind. I was traversing again and again. And once the path is created, as we told, the mind has a tendency, once the path is created, to traverse through that path without any reason. Now it becomes obsession. Once the path is created, now what happens? You will find in the modern age, all the lifestyle disease to a great extent is related to this, our obsession for sweet foods, sweet food article. And now, as you know, that the food has become so commercialized in all the food items, if you go and just check, you will find the sugar content is quite high. Why? Because they all know that the product will be sold, that the people are prone to have the sweet things. And that's how our consumption of sugar has increased like anything. And nowadays you will find that they are saying that almost all the lifestyle diseases, obesity, your diabetes, and from the diabetes is called the silent killer. From that, the other, all the disease follows. This all is because of what? The thing which is a necessity. That has got converted into an obsession. Very interesting. Even the last 10 years back, from 10, 15 years back, they used to say that when you have diabetes, you shouldn't take anything sweet. Even the fruits, you should be very cautious about. The fruits which are very sweet, you shouldn't take them. But very interesting, now the modern, as the things, the research is going on, they are almost assured of the fact that even if you have diabetes, if you don't take processed sugar, if you are having sweet fruits, even mango, there's a very sweet fruit, it is not going to harm you. What has happened when, because of obsession, we extract the sugar out, process it, it becomes almost like drug. It's almost an addiction, like the drug addiction. The necessity has got converted into obsession. And now all the lifestyle disease follows from that. So it is only just one example. If you take all our so-called obsessions, just take the lust. The Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Kamini Kanchan Maya. That lust and gold is Maya. You'll find a very interesting thing. Lust and gold both are necessary. Without that, without lust, you cannot think of propagation of life. Without gold, without money, I cannot sustain myself. They are necessary. But because that necessity has got converted into obsession in the process of our evolution, what has happened? You will find at last all the crime which we as a human society every day encounter or see in the newspaper or just see in the news channel. At last you will find 99.99% crime is because of these two. What has happened? The necessity has got converted into obsession. And now you will understand why in the commentary they have told that this raga, when because it gets converted into its find expression as greed. When it is finding expression as greed, I have lost the sense of propriety. I take something which is not good for me as something good. Just see how through raga the ignorance is working. And that's why it has been mentioned that our sense of right and wrong, the viveka, the conscience gets corrupted. So that's why it is an affliction. It is an affliction that people apparently may say raga is good. What's the harm in it? I have the freedom to pursue the pleasures of life. Who are you to restrict me? No one is there to restrict. It is just a word of caution. As Swami Ramakrishnananda, again and again, the direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, used to say, that now in the modern age you speak of freedom, but you again and again mistake it as freedom of the senses. Freedom of the senses is never a freedom. It actually speaks of bondage. You are already obsessed by the senses. Real freedom is freedom from the senses. So there's a great difference. We all take freedom means freedom of the senses, but the real freedom is freedom from the senses. Then only we can, if we are not obsessed, then only we can see the thing as it is. Otherwise, it is all going to result in ignorance. It is all going to end up in maya. Means what? I am just considering a thing. I am just looking at a thing and thinking it to be a reality. Actually, it is not. It is something different. So that's what has been spoken of as the raga, which distorts our vision. Similarly, dukkha. Dukkha also in the same way distorts our vision. In the 8th sutra, they're defining the second chapter, 8th sutra, they're defining that what is dukkha. Dukkha, what is dvesha? Dukkhanusai dvesha. Just like sukhanusai raga, similarly dukkhanusai dvesha. So aversion is what? That follows the remembrance of dukkha, remembrance of misery. So dvesha is dukkha anushai, remembrance of misery. That I previously was going through some miserable situation, and that has now become my obsession. Even it's very interesting. Dukkha, this your misery can also become an obsession. We will come to it. But before that, we should be very much aware of this aversion, because it creeps in and gradually it finds expression in a more and more violent way. This dvesha. First, it is just disagreeability, this matanakya, that I most probably in my working place don't agree with my colleague, or as a citizen, I don't agree with the political views of someone else. And sometimes we think it's okay to disagree. But what happens if we are not careful about it? It gets gradually seasoned into grina, matanaikya. Now I start hating the other person. And not only that, that grina gradually gets converted into krodha, anger. And not only that, it still further, it gets converted into this pratighata. I just start abusing, sometimes verbally, and sometimes we even become physical. All the violence results from that. Just this aversion, it has its all so many various phases of expression. And not only that, at last, the all the so-called killings, this jighansha, the tremendous anger getting converted into that your propensity, desire to kill. Because every day in the newspaper, every day you find this is happening. In the family violence, it is happening. Everywhere in the society, it is happening. At last, it ends up there. So this is a tremendous, so-called a enemy. This dvesha is our enemy. This, even in Bhagavad Gita, we find the God is indicating this Mahashano, Mahapapma, Vidhi and Vidhenamidam Vairinam. Know them to be the enemy. So, how it finds that it also, that aversion, In the same way, like Sukha, you will find here also we lose the sense of propriety, of right and wrong. We need not explain. This calm, from karma comes krodha. It's something that whenever my desire gets obscured, is not fulfilled, it gets converted into krodha. And once that krodha is there, the other things are bound to follow. The products of hatred, which we just now spoke of. But very interesting, this the misery can also, the thing which is not giving me pleasure, that can also become an obsession. The fear can become an obsession. One of the very common example in the modern days is, you have all heard of it, anorexia. It's something very, very dangerous. What this anorexia is, that suppose someone has, because of the same lifestyle disease, has developed obesity, is a bit fat. And now to reduce fat, he starts avoiding food, is aversion for food. At the beginning, it's a necessity that yes, to certain extent, aversion for food is good for me. But what's anorexia? That aversion becomes compulsive, that becomes obsessive. They won't take even the optimum amount of food which is required. They go on reducing. The aversion of food becomes so strong. At last, those persons become skin and bone. Not only that, they have to be hospitalized through drip food has to be, because they won't, there's so much aversion. In spite of the fact that has become skin and bone, they won't take food. And there are so many cases of death because of that. So just see that aversion can also be compulsive, can also be obsessive. The road rage which we face sometimes when the road, that there is no reason. That suddenly we find that the person who is behind me, that most probably the traffic light has just got green, and it took most probably a fraction of a second for me to just start. And by the time the one who is behind is honking, not only that, sometimes he comes out of his car and uses abusive language. Sometimes they can be quite violent. Actually, when we were evolving as a human being, as a society, if someone comes and snatches my belonging, the anger is quite reasonable there. But that type of anger can become obsessive. And then, without any reason, I may just show my anger. That if I'm going through that repetitive anger, for whatever may be the reason, you will find in those family where the child is not getting sufficient love, is not taken care of uh, in a proper manner, where they're abused for small reason, and sometimes even in a playful way, this child is being irritated, and the child develops an irritable nature, and sometimes we take it very casually, but we forget that that is becoming an obsession. That behind every so-called criminal, there is a past for which actually the entire society to a certain extent is responsible. If a child grows up in a loving atmosphere, he can never become a so-called a hardcore criminal. It was the lack of love, it was the total, that constant hatred, constant indifference through which the child was growing up, that has made that innumerable small instances of anger to become obsessive. Now, without reason, he gets angry. Without this, for small reason, we'll find it is agitated. In the schools, the bullying can make a child tremendously that short-tempered, because constantly the child is facing that abuse, and that can convert. So that's why the environment is a very big factor. So why we are saying, and once you develop that rage, now you lose your propriety, the sense of right and wrong. Now it has got converted into an obsession. So dvesha also, like the sukha, that raga, is a type of misapprehension. From it is a type of ignorance, where for the same reason as raga, we taking the evil as good and considering the misery pertaining to the senses as the misery of the detached self. So that is the ultimate thing, that the what dvesha this ultimately leads to, that the thing which is I consider as misery is actually misery of the psychophysical existence. It never affects the self. But because of our misapprehension, we think as if it is affecting me. So that's how we find that how the raga, how the dvesha, everything is at last resulting in misapprehension, ignorance. We are taking the right to be the wrong and again the wrong to be the right. So the sense of propriety of right and wrong is lost that way. And then the ninth sutra, they now discuss that the last of the five kleshas, that is abhisneha. So what is abhisneha? Abhisneha is defined as sarasavahi vidushopi tatah arura abhinivesha. Sarasavahi, it has become reflex, spontaneous. The afflictions which springs spontaneously as a reflex from accumulated latent impressions, and that which is established strongly even in the learned person. Vidushopi, Vidushopi, the learned person who has read the scriptures, who is aware, intellectually convinced of the fact that the soul is never annihilated, and thinks that she has transcended the fear of death. Those are the vidushas which has been spoken of here. Even in such person, vidushopi, what they find, that it is almost implanted. Vidushopi tatha arura. It is as if like a ghost. It is as if on its shoulder. Arura means something which has totally infatuated you, which has strongly intoxicated you. So, this fear of death is something which totally shadows our uh, common sense. We find that at the moment of crisis, all our intellectual understanding is washed away, and it, like a reflex, like a spontaneous impulse, we react to the situation in such a way which speaks that we are intensely scared of death. And that has been spoken of as abhisneha. So even in the learned, this spontaneity, this spontaneous reaction to the situations of life where my life is endangered, is at danger, is avisneha. So that is means sarasavahi vidushopi tatha arura avisneha. Sarasavahi means spontaneous, vidushopi for the even for the intellectuals, tatha arura. It has something which has totally ensnared them. It is totally imposing on them. That is arura, and that is avisneha. So this avisneha is something from which we can ascertain the fact that there has been past lives, because in this life we have never experienced a situation where my life is endangered, and from where suddenly that fear comes. You may say that we have heard of it. Forget about a grown up person, a small child who has not experienced death. But even for a small child, when the situation comes, when his life is at danger, you will find spontaneously that fear of death is even palpably visible in a small child. Swami Vivekananda gives a very wonderful example. The ducklings and the 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 what you say, the chicks and the ducklings all look alike, but you can easily distinguish them. They look almost same, but you can easily find out among those uh, all those what you say, in a group, if they are all mixed, if they're intermingling, the chicks and the ducklings, you can easily find out how you force them to run towards the water, and you will find the ducklings have no fear. They jump into the water, the chicks run away. So how it happens that they had no experience of death in this life. Why the so called chicks run away and the ducklings just simply jump into the water? So, this speaks of some experiences which we have gone through in my previous births, the fear of death. Now, the modern science, they say that it is genetical, that in our genes it is there. Now, Yoga Sutra, in a very nice way, is actually contending this view that it's not something which is ingrained in our genes, it is not something innate. Why? Because for a wise person, the one who has realized, who has went to that spiritual, ultimate spiritual realization, for such person we find the fear of death has gone. There are innumerable such examples where we find that the fear of death has totally vanished for a few fortunate ones. So, if something is innate, how can it just simply go off, can be washed off, can be eliminated? Something innate is something which is in the core of my being. I cannot get rid of it. So, if I can get rid of it, it proves that it is not something innate. It is not something the core of my being. It is something acquired as the memory of my past birth, which I can get rid of only through the spiritual realization. A time comes when there's no more Maya can afflict me, the ignorance cannot afflict me. I see the thing as it is. I know that I am the conscious being, which nothing can annihilate. It's no more just an intellectual conviction, it's a realization. When that happens, then we find the fear of death has fallen off. There are innumerable examples. Where Swami Vivekananda is indicating in one of his lectures that there was a Swami, a sadhu, a monk, who used to sit in the forest, in the just on the shade of it, under the shade of a tree in the forest, and constantly used to repeat, Soham, Soham. I am that conscious principle. I am that, I am that. Now, one day what happened, the villagers who were, there was a village on the other side of the forest, and the villagers from the village could hear that chanting, Soham Soham going on. And one day, a tiger just caught hold of that saint and dragged him into the deep forest. And the villagers could hear that the fading sound of Soham Soham. Till the last breath, it was dragged till it that the person died, that the sage died, that the monk died. His Soham chanting never stopped. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that if your conviction is just mere intellectual, it is not something which you have realized, then our condition is like parrot. You teach him to chant the name of God, but when someone comes and constricts its throat, it starts squeaking. It starts that, or the wild sound comes out. It forgets to take the name of Rama. So that's not realization. For a realized soul, even when they are in the same situation where their life is endangered, you find that conviction is something deep rooted. Nothing can swerve them from their this conviction that they are the eternal soul. Nothing can destroy them, nothing can annihilate them. So that shows that it is not, this fear of death is not something innate, it is not in our genes. We have acquired in our past births through the various experiences, which we can get rid of through our spiritual illumination. So, after discussing these various types of afflictions, now in the next sutra, the Yoga Sutra will speak of this how to get rid of all these afflictions. So, what are the process? That's the spiritual journey. So, the 10th sutra say that te pratiprasava heya sukshma. So, all these afflictions first have to be made sukshma. Now, they are very intense in my life. First, I have to attenuate them. I have to reduce their strength. And after that, what I have to do? Prati prasava. Is all those afflictions happened because of the conglomeration of certain factors. Those conglomeration means all evolution. So prati prasava means to give birth. Prati prasava means to dissolve. That my psychophysical existence is because of the ignorance. When the cause of the ignorance is gone, when the ignorance is gone, the real cause is gone, this integration now starts falling apart because there is no need. I know I am the pure conscious being. So why should I remain attached to this psychophysical existence? So now, once I dissociate from that, all the factors that conglomerated to just give me this psychophysical existence, they start falling apart. That is pratiprasava. So when at last those afflictions, first you make them sukshma, and at last when the afflictions are totally erased, then the prakriti falls off to render you free. There is nothing to now bind you. So what actually it is speaking of? Through the commentary, we will try to understand that this it happens. This pratiprasava happens in 4 steps. Already we have spoken of. They will be indicated now in the commentary. What? That first through the Kriya Yoga, the second chapter started with the discussion on the topic of Kriya Yoga. That's Tapa, Swadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana. These 3 practices constitutes the Kriya Yoga. The practices which establishes you in the practice of yoga. So they are the preliminary practices. Tapa, Swadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana. So this preliminary practice, what they do? They attenuate the Raga, Dvesha, Abhinivesha. The last 3 evolutes of the afflictions, they attenuate. You cannot get rid of them, but their strength is reduced. They won't afflict you that intensely as it used to be previously. Once you start to practice this Kriya Yoga, this Tapa, Swadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana, the afflictions strength get reduced. How? The first, that Tapa, through austerity. What is austerity? That I have understood that there are so many compulsions, so many obsessions, which in no way is helping me, is actually harming me. So once I understand that, once through intellectual understanding I understand, now I use to certain extent, I use my willpower to get rid of all those obsessions. That is tapa. That I don't allow my propensities to just flow. I give to certain extent a dam, a restriction to it. And that results in, from tapa comes detachment. To give a common example that how this tapa works at the initial stage, for any addictions, forget about addiction. Just let us try to understand that how tapa works by fasting. That for the first time you're fasting, and then what happens? That as you have never fasted, uh, by the lunchtime in the noon, you feel terrible hunger. But now, as you have already taken the vow of fasting, you forbear with it, patiently forbear with it. And you now realize for the first time that you thought that I will have to bear this pangs of hunger till my vow, till the time I have to continue with my vow. I have to just continue with that. I have to just experience, I have to be with that pangs of hunger. But those who have gone through that fasting, they all know that the pang of hunger is for some time. By evening or by late evening, suddenly you find you are feeling very fresh. That hunger, instead of becoming more intense, is no more there. And then most probably throughout the night, you are you're fasting because of some rituals or some celebration, and you can go on with your spiritual the rituals and all without the pang of hunger, actually feeling more refreshed. What has happened? First, with the will, when you were restraining yourself from taking food. For some time, the pang of hunger was there. But this pang of hunger is actually biological alarm, which is there to say you that this is the time to take food, take food. Now, if you ignore the alarm for some time, the alarm system itself falls off, it gets tired, and now it renders you freedom. Now you don't have to force yourself. You find that you have now developed the capacity to continue with your so-called restraint for longer and longer period of time. That's how you can delay your gratification. So this is nothing but tapas in short, that use your willpower to get rid of the obsession. At the beginning, it may give some uh, what you say, the misery, some pain. That's why in Bhagavad Gita they say very nicely, what is sattvic sukha? Agre vishamiva pariname amritopamam. At the beginning, it appears like visha, like something poison. But pariname, in the end, it becomes like amrita, like nectar. All the sattvic sukha is like that. The small child, when he's asked to study, doesn't like it. But chhatranam adhyayanam tapaha. See that word tapa is there. That though you don't like it, use your will. After some time, you will develop the likeness for study. That initial will at last will get converted into liking, and then you can continue. So this will by which I can restrain myself, that speaks of the tapa. And that results in detachment. Now we understand very clearly. So in the Kriya Yoga, the tapa helped me to get rid of raga by developing viraga. And then Ishvara Pranidhana. Ishvara Pranidhana, how it helps? To get rid of dvesha. How? In Ishvara Pranidhana, if you as you remember, that I am not supposed to have any expectation that all the good emotions, good feelings that I have is something which is implanted in me. It is not something which I, by my own credit, have acquired. The love, the compassion, it is there in me. The Creator has implanted in me to take care of His creation. So I am just a mere instrument. I am the channel through which the God's concern for His creation is flowing. So there is no question of getting something in return. If it is not me who am showing kindness, it is not me who am showing empathy, it is a God who is showing empathy through me. And where the question of something getting expectation, something in return, how can that expectation be there? So as I don't have expectation, so even someone is inimical towards me, even if someone is not faithful to what I have done to him or her, should not affect me. So when that surrender to the Ishvara, surrender to the divine comes, that, oh Lord, in my life, you as per the promptings of yours, I am taking care of the responsibilities. And not only that, when someone is supposed, as I apparently we feel that someone is supposed to return back at least as a few words of uh, gratitude, that also I don't expect, because after all it is God who is working through me. So through Ishvara Pranidhana, when it can be practiced properly, we can attenuate the dvesha. There cannot be any hatred for others. And Swadhyaya can help us to get rid of this Dehatma Buddhi Nivritti. Means that I am the body, I am the mind. Through this Swadhyaya. Swadhyaya is the repetition of your conviction. The mantra you are repeating. It takes you to such a engrossed flow where you will find, where a person who has already experienced that engrossment finds that when they are totally engrossed in the repetition of the mantra or in contemplation of the divine, the sense that they are the body, that also falls off. The total mind has been taken away by their object of concentration. Just as a musician, when he's engrossed in the music, forgets hunger, forgets thirst, is constantly for hours most probably is pursuing his music or her music. The sense that he's tired, he's hungry, falls off because of the engrossment. So ultimately, that divine engrossment makes this habitual, that my engrossment is so intense that the feeling that I am the body and the mind, that falls off and it becomes habitual. And with that, they have however that you are the body, that falls off. As you will find that when Narendranath met Ramakrishna for the first time, and that famous question he asked, have you seen God? For the first time, Naren found an answer, direct answer. No one could give him a satisfactory answer. What was the answer? Yes, I have seen him. The only difference is I see him more clearly, more palpably than I see you. So that became more palpable world of reality. For us, God is an imagination. This world is real. For Ramakrishna, this world is imagination. God is real. So that's what that I see him more palpably than you am seeing you, more clearly than I see you. So for such a person who for whom that spiritual domain has become a reality because of the total engrossment. For him, this dehabhavana vritti, that I am this psychophysical existence, falls off. And so for them, abhisneha gets weakened. So now you will understand just by practicing Kriya Yoga sincerely, we can get rid of the last three evolutes of affliction. That is the raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. And after that, the next practice is viveka khyati. That's what's the viveka khyati? That constantly trying to recollect the fact that I am not the body, not the mind, not the senses. I am meditating on this idea. It doesn't mean that I have to always say, I am not the body, not the mind, not the senses, I am the conscious principle. Even when, as a devotee, I am meditating on God, the same thing happens. When I'm meditating on God, what's the idea? God is there through eternity. I am there through eternity. My relation to the divine is eternal. I'm in eternal companionship with the divine. Is there anyone who thinks otherwise? No. That ultimately, my meditation, when I am meditating as a devotee, the same idea, I am negating the idea that I am this limited psychophysical existence. So that also, when it becomes habitual, with this type of contemplation, what happens? All your attachment starts falling off naturally. You know why? Because all our raga, dvesha, abhinivesha is hooked to asmita, this amness, this limited amness. With that, all those are hooked. If that amness is not there, they cannot stay. That who likes that delicacy? It is I who like that delicacy. Who hates uh, that person, a certain person? I hate a person because he is not agreeable to me. I don't agree. There's so many things which I don't agree with him. I hate him. So who is hating? I. So who is afraid of the death? It is I. So it is with the I, all those things are linked. Now, when you're constantly saying that I am not the body, not the mind, not the senses, you are constantly hammering on that idea of asmita. Now, this asmita is like the hub of a will. And all these raga, dvesha, abhinivesha are connected to that hub of the will with the spokes, innumerable spokes. So if you try to get rid of one attachment, the will is still there because there are so many other spokes to keep the will intact. But if you can get rid of the hub, the entire will collapses. So here, this next practice is that there's viveka khyati, that when we are meditating on God, or when as a jnana yogi, I'm constantly contemplating on the idea that I'm not the body, not the mind, not the senses. I am the Atma Swarupa. I am the conscious principle. When we are doing that, what's happening? It's hammering on the ego. And once the hub falls off, the entire thing will fall off. So once I get habituated with that type of meditation, then what happens? All the so-called the spikes they start collapsing. There's nothing there to hold me back. But if I say nothing there to hold me back, that will be a mistake. Why? Because yes, previously all my thoughts, all my vrittis, all my likings, dislikings were attached to the idea I am the body, I am the mind, I am the senses. Now, with the constant practice, what has happened? One thought is still there. What is the thought? I am not the body, not the mind, not the senses. But still, it is a thought. Still, it is a thought. That as long as a thought is there, your limited individuality continues. So previously the thought was I am not the body, not the mind, not the senses. Previously the idea was I am the body, I am the mind, I am the senses. Now it has become because of viveka khyati. Khyati means knowledge, viveka means discrimination. So it is this discriminative knowledge that I am not the body, not the mind, not the senses. As this has become a palpable fact of my life, then what happens? From that, para vairagya ensues. Now, your amness has no immediate conscience. So, what happens? Your consciousness gets broadened. It is our immediate concerns which keeps us limited to the immediate responsibilities. When the conscience falls off, your awareness encompasses even the past lives. You become jati smara. You remember. And you will find in the life of Buddha, it is indicated that before going to that realization, first he became jati smara. And from jati smaratva comes paravairagya. That we find that how through innumerable lives we were chasing blindly to get happiness on the things in which you can never get happiness, because they are all fleeting, they're all constantly flowing, they're changing, and it becomes a palpably visible fact because of the jati smaratya. And from that, para vairagya ensues. Now the will to keep the prakriti intact so that I can continue in this physical plane, that starts falling off. The moment that ego is totally gone because of that realization, that para vairagya, now the nature, that the hold which you had on the nature, that starts falling off. That results in prati prasava. So here the chitta starts dissolving. It's not annihilation, it's just making you free. Till now, because of the ignorance, I was using the prakriti as a clutch. That falls off. And that has been spoken of as pratiprasava. So, what are the four stages that which has been spoken of here? That through which it can result in this kleshas can be totally annihilated. This is the first is the vairagya through kriya yoga. We got that, which stops this our chase for the pleasures of life. Next comes the viveka khyati, the contemplation of my real nature. From that ensues paravairagya, that supreme detachment, and that again results in pratiprasava. From the supreme detachment, that's what you say, the nature starts falling off, rendering you the ultimate liberation, kaivalya, freedom. Just with an example, we will stop today's discussion. With this example helps us to understand the idea. What is vairagya like? That suppose that this body mind complex is like a tree, and the purusha is the one who has climbed the tree. So we, the purusha, have climbed this tree, and what we are doing, constantly in search of fruits. We are extending our hands to get the fruits and enjoy the sweetness of it. Vairagya is first stopping to stretch out to taste the fruits. You stop that. That is through vairagya, a part of kriya yoga. The next what comes? The viveka khyati. That I don't, reach out to get the fruits. I'm just sitting in a branch. That branch is asmita. That my amness is still, previously it was with the, the likeness for all the things. Now only that amness is there, that I am not the body, not the mind, not the senses. That thought, that amness With that, you're just clinging to. And when the paravairagya comes, what happens? You are just leaving the hold of that branch also. Very interesting. For pratiprasava, there is no need for any effort. There is no effort required. Once you lose the hold, the gravitation, just when you're sitting on a plant, when you're sitting on a tree, to fall, no effort is required. You just have to release the hold of the branch. The gravity pulls you down. Similarly, the plan of the universe is such. That's the grace. The plan of the God's grace is there. He has planned the universe in such a way. The moment you release the hold onto the Prakriti, you just the way the gravitation pulls you down, here the grace pulls you up, detaches you from the psychophysical existence. It pulls you up to get established in your real nature, and the nature falls off, and that is pratiprasava. So that's the thing which has been indicated in the 10th sutra, that that all this, what is this te pratiprasava hya sukshma, this all these afflictions first has to be made sukshma. The sukshma speaks of attenuation, and then they have to be totally annihilated. Here means to be totally eradicated by pratiprasava. This is the fourth step, which we have just now spoke of. Vairagya, first step. Viveka khyati, second step. The third step is the paravairagya, which is leading to the pratiprasava. So these four steps, we can totally annihilate them. And that's the goal of the yoga. These afflictions has to be eradicated. So this, the 11th sutra, we will take up again in the next class. We will again elaborate the 10th sutra to just make the idea clear, because it speaks a lot. So we will take up again in the next class. We'll start with the 10th sutra again to elaborate a bit more on it, and then go to the 11th sutra, which speaks of the preliminary practices. And then on the 12th, 13th, 14th, in the following classes we will come, which will speak of the process of transmigration. That they will speak of. And then it will follow with the Ashtanga Yoga, the Eightfold Practices. We will come gradually to all those steps. So with this, we stop our discussion today. Thank you.
Namaskar, Swamiji.
Ha.
Thank you and good night.
Namaskar. Good night.
Pranam, Swamiji.
Ha.
Pranam,
Namaskar.
Swamiji.
Namaskar and thank you.